Thanks to Path of Exile 2 for sponsoring today's video. Hey everyone, welcome back. Alright, Path of Exile 2. So, a few weeks ago, they reached out asking to sponsor a video for their latest update, patch 0.2 Dawn of the Hunt. Now, pretty much immediately, I was like, yeah bro, easy. Like, I've already played 300 hours of this game, I was obsessed with it for months on end, logging in every single day, so absolutely, I am more than happy and was already planning to check out the newest stuff. Now, as is always the case with this sort of thing, I do so under the condition that I'm given free reign to make the videos how I please, as I always do. Typically, this means providing an overview of the game, showing off its content, and then sharing my thoughts, including what I think is good and what I think needs improvement. Well, they happily agreed, and it's a good thing too, because yes, I've got some feedback. Now, for starters, I will say there's a lot that I have enjoyed about this update. In particular, I've liked all the new content, I've enjoyed the improved and revamped endgame, the updated map variety, as well as all of the various new event types that we encounter, all of which have resulted in what feels like a much more fleshed out, interesting, and a varied endgame experience compared to what we had at the start of early access. I've been grinding through it, playing somewhere around 50 to 60 hours since Friday. I'm nearly level 90 right now, clearing tier 15 maps with relative ease, and on balance, I would say that I've enjoyed my time. However, at the same time, it's been far from perfect or smooth. It's certainly not been incredibly smooth. There's been a lot of issues cropping up these last few days, some of which have in fact gotten in the way of my otherwise good time. These include client crashes and server issues completely plaguing me all of Friday, progression through the main campaign that was a bit sluggish and took noticeably longer than I remember the first time around, all of this a consequence of them reining in player power, and the lack of regular gear upgrades dropping, as well as some super beefed up enemies, which was then exacerbated by the early access requirement of having to run through the same 3 acts 2 times per character, and that is just some of the issues that I've run into, the rest of which we will cover later. So yeah, while there is a lot that I like about this update, and I have generally enjoyed playing it, at the same time there are some things I don't. Now on the plus side, some of these issues have already been addressed, with GGG rolling out several hotfixes since the update came out on Friday, which is great, but there is still absolutely more to be done, and I'm hoping they do so in the future. Now with all that out of the way, let's dive in and take a look at Path of Exile 2 patch 0.2 Dawn of the Hunt. So first, I would like to start off with a quick overview of everything new with this update. For those of you who haven't seen or heard anything about this patch prior to watching this video, however, we do have timestamps with name chapters below, so if you do already know all this stuff, the basic overview, feel free to skip ahead. Alright, so the TLDR of this patch is that we have got a new class, the Huntress, with 2 ascendancies, the new spear weapon type with all of its corresponding skills, along with a new offhand, the Buckler, that enables the parry mechanic. There are 3 new ascendancies, one for the witch, warrior, and mercenary each, and then a bunch of endgame improvements and updates, which include things like new events and content types via the Wisps, Rogue Exiles, and some new unique maps. We got updates to many prior League mechanics, some big improvements to towers to make them more varied and interesting, as well as now including boss fights. There are over 100 new support gems and 100 uniques to collect, and then some sweeping changes that were made to class balance and gear, essentially completely readjusting and updating the meta. Alright, so starting with the new class, the Huntress, this is a dexterity-focused character whose primary default weapon, the spear, combines melee and ranged abilities, with extended attacks, weapon throws, and a bunch of elemental combo potential. You've got your baseline skills that are then further enhanced when mixed with others. Now, probably one of the best-known, stronger combos at the moment comes from 2 skills that you get fairly early on, Whirling Slash and Twister. So Whirling Slash will strike around you in a circle, creating a whirlwind in place. While standing inside of this, it does some damage and blinds enemies. If you leave, the whirlwind explodes. Then there is Twister, which at a baseline simply tosses out this ranged little tornado. However, when combined with Whirling Slash, you then summon multiple tornadoes at once, and this scales up to an insane degree where come endgame, you got some gear and build setups that have you shooting out like 30 plus elemental infused tornadoes, moving in every direction, tearing through everything in their path. Now also with the Huntress and the spear, warrior comes the addition of the buckler, a new offhand item type. This introduces the parry mechanic, so you hold down parry, it raises your buckler, and then you automatically counter any incoming attack. This will then debuff the enemy and opens up several follow-up combos. Now, beyond the Huntress and the new weapons, we got ascendancies for the warrior, mercenary, and witch. The witch, which is a personal favorite of mine, can now choose the lich ascendancy, which is all focused on chaos and curses. You can sacrifice life to enhance your energy shield. You get massive increases in power for gems, and then you can grant like bonus chaos damage to you and your allies, or make it so that cursed enemies, when they die, they will explode. For the warrior, you got Smith a Katana. This is hilarious. It's like a blacksmithing focus. You can temper your weapon on the maps, which then grants explosion buffs to your attacks. This also makes just for some hilarious moments and memes with warriors just standing there hammering away in the middle of a boss fight. The Smith Ascendancy also lets you manifest weapons, summoning a floating weapon to attack with you. You get special armor perks where you can only use normal armor, but then have these notables that let you pick up whatever affixes you want, which seems like a very, very great tanky on a budget option. This just seems like a very, very powerful ascendancy. And then Mercenary has Tactician, which is crossbow focused, causes all major projectiles to pin enemies. You can place multiple banners for buffs. You can share your damage with allies and summon a barrage of arrows. All right, so we got over as well 100 new support gems with some interesting options here, although the current running joke at the moment is that too many of these are super conditional, where like you'll only get a damage buff every other Friday when you collect your paycheck or some garbage. Jokes aside though, it's still really early days, sort of like the Spectres. At the moment, it's probably too early to tell if any of these are really gonna open up with any potential combos and any builds will shine. Again, we're only a few days into the patch, so we'll have to see how this all pans out. And new items along the same lines. We got 100 new items in the game, or rather 100 new unique items to be exact. Now, they have said that these are aimed at fleshing out and adding more usable options, specifically for the mid and end game characters. I found a few of them that I thought were quite useful. Some of them I'm still using some new uniques in my current end game build. Now it's mostly, however, yellows with a focus on all of the typical stuff that you had the first time around. Like, I'm currently trying to stack energy shield, get my health and resistances up, and then boosting my damage via getting plus spell skills, getting some bonus chaos and spell damage, and increasing cast speed. But yeah, and we've got a bunch of new stuff to help with crafting. So for example, they have this edition of fractured orbs. These allow you to fracture a random modifier on any rare item that has at least 4. What this does is it locks it in place so that you can't accidentally replace it as you do other crafting in the future. We got recombination, where you can merge 2 items together, and this is going to give you a combination of the rolls on each of them, hoping for a best possible outcome. You got 3 good ones on this one, 3 on another, you put them together, and maybe you get both of them combined. That's the idea anyways. And then they added some more rune types to the game with many tiers for each type of rune, and they said here their stated goal was to have more variety of runes that are useful at the end game compared to a more narrow option, as was previously the case. And then finally, the big stuff for me was all of the end game changes and updates. So mapping across the board got some big improvements. They've really tried to focus on increasing the event and encounter variety, and I gotta say, this is one of the things that I've enjoyed the most. So for starters, we got 7 brand new map types. So each of these are gonna have their own look in their own environment with unique encounters and mechanics to correspond with them as well. We also got a bunch of new encounters and or events. These are things you're gonna see throughout the campaign, but also as you go through the end game mapping. These include rogue exiles. These are essentially like fake players that act as strong boss fights. They use the same skills and items that player use, kind of simulating a PvP experience. Now, when you kill them, the cool thing is they drop all of the items that they're using. So if you see an item on a rogue exile that you really like, could get some really good stuff here. There are 12 different rogue exiles in total for you to come across. There's also these wisp events. So you're gonna see these wisps on the map. They're kind of floating there, little spectral creatures. As you walk towards them, they then start moving across the map. When they come across enemy characters, they're going to buff them, so they'll be more difficult to take out. Eventually though, the wisp leads you to a particular rare or unique monster. It then possesses them, juicing them up, and there's 12 distinct wisp types. Each of them bring their own mechanics and rewards that they drop. And then they also introduce some new strong box types. The most interesting so far for me has definitely been the legacy boxes. You'll see like this character corpse on a stone. You click it, it then revives that monster. X X number of times. The more times it gets revived, the stronger it gets, ideally resulting in some big rewards. Although I gotta say, the rewards so far have been kind of disappointing. They haven't been so big. Hope to see them get bigger. There's also some new onboarding for the end game. So now once you finish your cruel playthrough of the campaign, your first task is to locate a corrupted nexus. And this is part of the overhaul to the corruption mechanic. So basically there are now pockets of the map that are corrupted. You're actually going to see visual representation of this on the Atlas map itself, but then the corrupted nodes also have that corruption on the landscape, like on the ground within the map, and they also come with corrupted enemies that will spawn as you go through clearing each of the maps. Eventually you get to the nexus, and this is something that's like a goal. That's your objective, to cleanse the corrupted nexus. This requires defeating a large corrupted boss that is going to spawn after you complete whatever other map objective there is. You complete the map objective at the corrupted nexus, the boss spawns, you kill the boss, he then rewards you Atlas passive points, as well as leading to a new mechanic, because clearing the corrupted nexus will then cleanse any remaining corrupted maps that are nearby, and then once cleansed, that adds new monsters to those map nodes, as well as introducing this new reward of fractured orbs. Towers get a pretty major overhaul. They have reduced the overall number of towers to having about a third as many as were in the game before, but they are now much more powerful and rewarding, and I also gotta say they're just a lot more interesting. So all of the towers take place in entirely new locations, all of which will be based depending on the biome that you're currently in. These come typically in multiple levels or layers and can now even have bosses included on them. Also, tablets that are added after the fact now have twice as many mechanics. Each tower as well can now consume up to 3 tablets at a time, which allows for even more juicing, making them even more worth running, because you can have 3 different enhancement types through 3 different tablets on so many surrounding nodes. They made Waystone sustain easier. For example, now by default you get 6 attempts or deaths before you lose your map mechanics. Now as you enhance the maps that add more modifiers, that will reduce the number of spawns, but at a baseline you just have way more attempts. And then pinnacle bosses, they made these more approachable as well. The fights no longer grant or remove experience, so you don't have to be scared to try these difficult fights out and learn the mechanics, as it's not going to result in you drastically losing experience of your current level. All right, so that is like the basic rundown of the big new content additions and changes. They also made some pretty massive sweeping balance adjustments, essentially nuking any of the overly tuned builds from the initial season. Players are currently kind of still sorting through what the new good builds are going to be, but there do look to be a few new contenders for build combos and skill setups than what we saw in the past, although we'll see how it all shakes out in the coming weeks. Maybe it's just Invoker at the top and Gemling Legionnaire, and you know, we'll see, right? But who knows? Generally speaking though, everyone is just feeling a bit weaker than they did at the start of the first season in early access, between them tuning back player power, nuking what was previously the good builds, and then also seriously beefing up enemies, although that's been adjusted in the past few days, which we'll get to. All right, so next I want to take you through kind of what my general experience has been in these handful of days. Like, what have I been up to? What's my current status? How's the gameplay been going for me? So Friday, gotta be honest, right out the gate, it was a bit of a mess. In particular, just right away, I started off with having terrible performance issues in the first couple of zones, although that was mostly fixed by adjusting some certain graphic settings. Big shout out to the in-game global chat for saving me on that. People were telling what to turn off, what to tweak, whatever, but that mostly fixed the frame rate issue that I was having right out the jump. The bigger problem though was that the game was crashing nearly constantly. In fact, I think I had somewhere around 40 client crashes on Friday. Especially, it seemed every time I would have to port back to town, the game would crash, which that was a requirement. Like, every single main quest constantly has you going back to town. It's not like you can't go back to town. So I just basically had to deal with crashing all day Friday. Like I said, there was like 40 crashes. Despite that though, still played for several hours. Now I decided to start this season going with a witch, beginning with a build that was similar to what I played last season, just because it's what I was familiar with, mostly focusing on having skeleton minions, using firewall and raging spirits. That was the whole gist of it. On the first day, I got through most of the way to the end of Act 2 before calling it a night. Saturday, I woke up and the crash issue was fixed. Holy crap, I was so happy. It looked like it got patched overnight. From then on out, the game was running mostly fine, although still having crashing issues. They're far less frequent, and also seem a bit more random. I just seem to be like randomly crashing. I don't know if that's better or worse. Well, it's definitely better because as of right now, I'm only crashing like 2 to 4 times every single day as opposed to 40 times on Friday. So it is at least improved. So Saturday, I progressed through and finished the campaign the first time around. I then got partway through the second time on cruel difficulty. Saturday is also when I cleared the first 2 trials, and I opted for the new Lich Ascendancy. It's the whole reason I decided to play Witch again. I thought Lich looked really cool. I was still playing minions at the time, but I then started mixing things up, adding some more chaos spells, until eventually I shifted into the full-blown Contagion, Essence Drain, Dot Spread style, which it's a lot of fun. I really like it. All right, Sunday, I finished up the campaign completely and got into endgame to start mapping. Lots of really cool new additions. These were fun to see. The whole new corruption system, the new objectives with the new onboarding, checking out some of the updated maps, coming across the spirit events, the rogue exiles, the new towers, which I really love. All around, the onboarding experience and just the endgame process in general, much improved. I like it. This is where I really started to have a good time. Monday, I continued progressing through maps, working my way up through the difficulty tiers while tuning my build and getting some new gear. I also got quite lucky here with a few crafted pieces. Like I managed to craft, I don't know how, I managed to craft a +5 to chaos skills as well as having plus spell power on my wand. I think this thing would sell for multiple divs, but I need it, so whatever. And then come Tuesday, kept grinding tier 15s, just moving my way through the Atlas mapping. Not really a clear goal in mind. I'm just kind of enjoying doing boss nodes for the most part, making my way to towers, trying to put multiple tablets to really buff up the nodes all around there. And then I'm also enjoying going through the corrupted zones whenever that becomes visible, getting Atlas points in the process of all of this. And I gotta say, again, this whole chaos dot spread build, while it's not super bursty and doesn't have the crazy clear speed of some other classes, it's quite consistent, has decent clear, and maybe best of all, it like rarely dies. I really enjoy it. So that is basically where I'm at the moment. Now let's go ahead and move on to my thoughts. So from the start, generally, I gotta say that I think the end game is much improved, which I'm happy to see. There's just far more variety and a lot more interesting stuff going on. The whole new corrupt and cleanse mechanic is neat. Like, as you get closer to the corrupt nexus, the maps actually get more visible corruption in them. Plus, they will spawn corrupt enemies as you kill enemies. And then you have to clear the nexus, you fight that corrupted boss at the end, and then doing this not only gives you Atlas tree points, but it then cleanses those previously corrupted areas, which open up its whole new second mechanic, new enemies, and new rewards. I like the towers. They are infinitely more interesting, just quite varied based on the surrounding biomes, and they often have a boss fight at the end as well, which I really like. I just find them a lot more engaging than the towers that came out in the early access release. Also, the tablets are just a whole lot better. It's just, it feels more satisfying to go to clear a tablet and then just super juice all the maps around them. And some of these tablets, you're getting like 20 to 30 nodes in the surrounding area enhanced with whatever mechanic it is, whether you're adding bosses or radiation or adding whatever endgame mechanic you like breaches or expedition, for example. They definitely executed on making towers feel more satisfying. Not only they're more fun to run, but clearing it then means like you got like a whole bunch of mechanics on your surrounding nodes all of a sudden, which is really great. I also like some of the new unique maps that they've added. So Liam and I, just the other day, we played through this map where the light radius was reduced to basically nothing just around the player character. You really couldn't see anything on most of the parameter of the screen. So this caused us to take it slow, which I just found interesting, something a little different. And then also today I found this one unique map called Castaway. It's basically just this island shipwreck where there's tons of gold piles everywhere. You got to cleanse these spirits around the edge of the island, and then you fight a boss. He drops this breaching charge. You take the charge to the center of the map, you blow it up, you get a bunch of gold. That was cool. The rogue exiles, these are really fun. They're, again, kind of more challenging fights with some good rewards. I get excited every time I see a rogue exile because I know they're gonna probably have some cool gear, a unique item maybe. I've actually found a few good pieces fighting these. I think the wisp events are really cool as well. In particular, like I'm a sucker for all these like spectral, ethereal, ghostly spirit animal effects that they have. You'll see like little butterflies or deer walking around, and some of this gets incorporated into whatever boss or whatever rare monster that they enhance at the end. Like you'll get charging stags of deer or something. I don't know. I just like this stuff. Again, I'm kind of of a sucker for the spectral spirit animal stuff, so I like it personally. It's been fun checking out the new uniques and support gems. Again, just some more options to tinker around with, even if a bunch of these end up being kind of useless. It's cool to play around with this stuff. And lastly, I'm just really enjoying the Lich Ascendancy for the Witch. And yeah, this Contagion Essence Drain build has been a lot of fun. I've played around with a few different variants, and I think I've settled on one that I enjoy. Now, that does it for the positive. Let's talk about the pain points. The crashes on Friday, it sucked. Like, it was really bad, really rough stuff. Now, they did fix what was the main issue whenever we were porting back to town of just getting a hard crash, but they haven't fixed all of the issues. Like I said, I still get a handful of crashes every single day. Hopefully, this is something they continue to work on and get sorted. Also, sort of along the same lines, we've been getting rollbacks that are happening like mid-map and people losing drops as a result. For example, Liam happened to find like this God Roll spear, and then right then, at the same time it dropped, he got rolled back, and then all of a sudden the item had no affixes on it. Like, what? He told me it was something that was going to sell for many divs, so that sucks, right? That really sucks. We've also seen a handful of bugs here and there as well, like a character getting stuck out of the map or being unable to revive if you happen to die on a boss fight when you're grouped up in a party. So that sucks. Stuff like that we hope gets fixed. But really the biggest issues, and where a lot of the complaints and pain points have been coming from the community, kind of has to do with the difficulty of the game, the pacing of the game, and the player power, and how those things all work together. It seems like in particular right now, the experience of playing through the campaign, it is slow, it feels sluggish, and for a lot of builds and a lot of players, they just feel incredibly weak. Kind of sucks the power out of the whole power fantasy that these games are associated with. Consensus here is just that playing through the campaign right now with how the balancing and tuning of all those combination of things, it's a bit of a slog. The enemies have way too much life, they take too long to kill. This could be offset if the players are more powerful occasionally, but they just haven't been. The maps are also seemingly too big and annoying to navigate with a lot of dead ends, causing you to backtrack. Even with the fast travel waypoints that they have, doesn't seem to be enough. And enemies, beyond being really tanky, are so fast for the pace of the game that it looks like they're trying to get us to play at. They want it to be more fast-paced and methodical, but when you get surrounded by these 10 little raptor bird creatures before you can even cast your first parry backflip, it's just not exactly an enjoyable experience. Now, a lot of this becomes less of an issue as you move in later into the game, as you gear up and you get stronger and your builds start to come online. But getting to that point takes like 15 to 20 hours of what a lot of people are describing as, and feels like a bit of a slog to try to get through that campaign. And it could even take more than 20 hours depending on the build and character class you happen to pick, and whether or not you get lucky with any gear drops at the start of the season. A lot of times games like this will feel better if you are given these periodic power boosts as you go throughout consistently, whether that comes via a skill upgrade or finding an item drop, things that just give you massive boost in power for a period of time. Kind of wants to look like you start off weak, but then you get your first big spell and you get a power spike, and then you get weaker as you progress, but then you get a big weapon drop and you get a power spike, and you want to get power spike as you go throughout. But right now it kind of feels like it's just like a flat difficulty, and it's very frustrating the whole time with not enough power spikes in between. If they can address that, whether that's by tuning back mobs, whether that's by slowing down their speed so we can engage with fewer of them and manage them at the more methodical pace, or whether that's by increasing the frequency of item drops or just scaling player damage in a way. We want those. You want those power spikes. It wants to look something like that. That's at least in my humble opinion. Now, I gotta say, some of these things, or at least GGG seems aware of it because they have addressed it, aspects of this, with several hotfixes released in the first few days. These have been aimed at fixing, of course, the major bugs, dealing with the crashing, but also doing some rebalancing based on some of this early player feedback, or more specifically, based on whatever backend data they're seeing, right? Like, we know they have the stats, we know they see how often players are dying, how long boss fights are taking, and how much more time are people spending going through the campaign than what they were in the initial release of early access. These hotfixes include things like fixing the crashes that were occurring whenever players ported back to town. Like I said, that was fixed for me by Saturday, along with various other crash and bug fixes, although they've still got more to do. I am still crashing as mentioned. They massively reduced enemy health. In fact, every single day there was a hotfix to this end, with most every enemy across the board getting some sort of a reduction, with the most extreme example being the minions of rare monsters who went from having 400% bonus life down to 94. That is a massive nerf. They also fixed this issue where the new warrior ascendancy couldn't be selected. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Now, beyond those hotfixes, we also saw a forum post where they talked with us a bit about some of the major points of player feedback and what they were planning to do about it. So they brought up some Huntress specific concerns where people just weren't loving the general play style and setup required to deal damage. Just a lot of setup before you can actually start damaging the enemy, and the whole parry system with the combos. The flow just didn't seem to be there, and that is something that they're going to look into. Player minion damage and life, if you were playing minion builds like I started out with, they just weren't feeling very good. Looks like this was nerfed more heavily than they intended during the campaign period, and they plan to fix that in the future. Monster life was too high, which, as mentioned, they've already started patching out, and I would not be surprised if we see continuous adjustments in the future. As for the large area sizes, they do intend to scale back many zones in Act 3 in particular, and that was the biggest offender. Act 3 has just these most massive maps. They're going to be tuning them back, especially the one right before you get to draining the swamp for the Aztec temple. That map going through all of those corridors, it just takes forever. I remember it taking forever when I first played the game back in December and January, so they're going to be working on this stuff. The crashes and disconnects, while they have fixed many of these issues, there's still some that remain to be addressed, and they are going to address them. And then lastly, they wrapped it up by talking about some quality of life features they have planned, like bookmarking locations on the Atlas map, more stash tab affinities, and ways to rebind specters as well as tame beasts so you can more easily play with them again. Now, beyond this, I definitely think that they should maybe consider addressing monster move speed, especially prior to endgame. I think when you get to endgame and your builds start to come online and you're dealing more damage and you're doing more screen clearing, I think it's okay for the monster speed, but working up to endgame where we just don't have that damage output, I think the monsters need to be reined in accordingly if they expect player power to stay where it is in Acts 1 through 3 and then Acts 1 through 3 cruel. Also, loot drops, it'd be nice to see those boost up, so again, more player power spikes as we're going through the campaign, just so we get some more meaningful upgrades in that process. All right, that about does it. Now, as mentioned, overall, I have enjoyed this update. I know there was a long list of feedback and pain points, but I've been playing 60 hours since Friday. I got my Witch Lich up to almost level 90 now. I'm clearing tier 15 maps. I'm having a fun time going through that process. I'm going to intend to check out the new class myself as well at some point. Some of those builds, the Whirlwind Twister Tornado thing with 900 tornadoes coming out, it seems like it'd be fun to play around with, but I just couldn't resist it. I really like the Witch. I'm hoping the minions get sorted too, because I would like to play a minion build again, but I like my Drain Life dot spec. It reminds me of playing a Warlock in Burning Crusade. Good old days back then. But yeah, that does it for this. Checking out the latest update for Path of Exile 2. Thank you as always for watching. They have seemed receptive to player feedback. I hope they continue this trend, that they continue the hot fixes and updates and patches. Many of the biggest issues that we've been discussing, and that some of which we have touched on in this video. Yeah, although there are definitely some glaring issues, if they can iron those things out, I do like the new stuff, and I really have enjoyed the improvements to the end game, and I just can't wait to see more. Which, speaking of which, this is just one of many upcoming updates between now and the 1.0 launch. In fact, given that this is patch 0.2, presumably, we expect 7 and then eventually 8 more similarly sized patches as we go between now and the final 1.0 release. I'm looking forward to see what they've got cooking. Can't wait. That does it for today's video, though. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy. Oh, and of course, thank you once again to Path of Exile 2 for sponsoring today's video. If you haven't yet already and would like to check out the game, be sure to use my link in the video description below.